Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stackelhouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. Today, I have a bonus episode for you. This is from the To Your Health podcast hosted by Esther Avant. We had such a great conversation that I wanted to share it with you. In this interview, we discuss everything from the basics of what fibromyalgia is to how to tell the difference between fibromyalgia and other conditions like menopause. I also give you some tips to better budget your energy and how to communicate better with your loved ones. I also have some mindset shifts that can really make a difference as you're learning to manage your fibromyalgia. Now, if you want to hear more from Esther, be sure to check out her podcast. It's called To Your Health, and I will have a link in today's show notes. Just look in the show notes right here in your podcast app, and you will find a link to Esther's show. Now, enjoy my conversation with Esther and To Your Health.
Welcome back to the To Your Health podcast. Today I'm joined by a guest who is really an expert in her field, and we're going to be talking about a disease, an issue that affects 1 in 13 women. So if you are not personally affected, the odds that someone you know are pretty good. We're going to be talking about fibromyalgia, and my guest, Tami Stackelhouse, is an award-winning author. She's the founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute, the host of the Fibromyalgia podcast, and executive producer of a feature documentary called Invisible. What she does is helps patients take back control of their lives and their health using a signature fibromyalgia wellness framework, so they can stop feeling like their bodies are a prison and can live lives that they love. And something we were just talking about before we hit record is how common it is for women to have fibromyalgia and not know it. So don't click out of the episode just because you think it doesn't affect you. It could be really eye-opening for you to learn more about it, both to support other women in your life or potentially to help you help yourself. So Tami, thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to learn more about you and how this came to be your life's work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. You know, like most people, I got into this work because it was something I struggled with, right? So I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2007. It was about 6 months after I'd gotten married, which is probably a whole other podcast. That was a whole realization. But, I really struggled for several years. I was diagnosed in 2007. 2008, I realized, I can't really take care of myself. I can't take care of my house. Maybe this is what disability is all about. That's a whole thing, right? I filed for Social Security disability at that point. And then in 2009, I had this moment of realization where my life just was not going at all in the direction that I wanted to go. And just had an appointment with my doctor to talk about it. We're doing all these things. I still feel like I'm sort of treading water. I'm still so exhausted. I'm still in pain. I can only leave my house once a week, at that stage. And what can we do? What can we do different? Because this is not what I want my future to look like. Right. And that's when she introduced me to a health coach in her office. And that really was the thing that turned everything around for me. I always tell people I'm a fan of coaching, not because I am a coach, but because it was a coach that changed my life. Right. My coach didn't know anything about fibromyalgia. But she still was a great partner to, troubleshoot things with and talk things through and hold me accountable and all of that kind of stuff. And so 6 months after working with my coach, I really started to feel a lot better. That's when I became a coach myself and started coaching. And that was 16 years ago now.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Very cool. That is why a lot of people do what they do, is their
Yep.
personal experience. So let's kind of back up a little bit, because I would imagine there are people listening who are like, I've heard the term, maybe I kind of distantly know someone who has it, but you gotta kind of fill me in on the specifics. So can you explain what fibromyalgia is and how it affects the people who have it?
Yes, absolutely. Fibromyalgia sometimes has a little bit of a bad reputation. Like if you see an episode of House, the patient who has fibromyalgia is sort of treated like they're crazy. And for a long time, fibromyalgia was considered to be a psychosomatic illness, right? It was like you were a hypochondriac kind of a deal. But that is not the case. Fibromyalgia is a very real condition with very physical things happening in the body. It's not just in your mind. So we experience four primary symptoms. There's a ton of other symptoms too, but primarily we're talking about widespread body pain. And if you don't have fibromyalgia, the easiest way I can explain this is if you've ever gotten sick with the flu, how
Mm.
everything hurts, like you feel like your eyelashes hurt. That's the kind of pain that we get with fibromyalgia. The other thing is that it moves around a lot. So your legs might hurt one day, and then the next day your legs are fine, but your back hurts. And so the pain travels, which makes it really hard to pin down too. So widespread body pain, unrelenting fatigue. This is a level of fatigue that is beyond just, I'm tired, right? A nap doesn't fix this. The way I like to describe it is, we're like those old cell phones that you would charge all night long and they'd say they were full, but they'd last like 45 minutes. That's what our little batteries are like. We do have mitochondrial dysfunction. That's part of the problem. And then we also have unrefreshing sleep. So we can sleep and sleep and sleep and sleep and wake up and feel like we didn't sleep at all. We don't get deep sleep. We kind of stay in fight or flight even while we're sleeping. One of our fibro doctors, Dr. Ginevra, she talks about sleeping with one eye open like you're watching for saber-toothed tigers.
Mhm.
And I think that's a good explanation, right? So we don't get good sleep. And then, of course, you have all of those things combined. You also have brain fog, which those things would cause brain fog on its own. And this is where I think it can be really difficult for people, especially women, especially menopause, perimenopause, like everything that I've just described. Every single person listening to this podcast has probably experienced, right?
That's exactly what I was just going to say, is I can see everybody listening just nodding and being like, I have checked all of those boxes. Does this mean I have it? So how is fibromyalgia diagnosed?
Yeah, great question. So fibromyalgia itself does not have its own like blood test or anything like that that's reliable, which is part of the problem as well, right? It is you do have to have somebody who understands fibromyalgia to really be able to diagnose you. We also do need to rule out some other things, right? Like this could be perimenopause. But there's an aspect of fibromyalgia that is a little bit different. And the best way I can describe that is fibromyalgia is an amplifier. So if you don't have fibromyalgia and you're walking down the hall and you stub your toe on something, your toe will hurt. And after a while, your toe won't hurt and you'll go about with your day, right? If you have fibromyalgia, that pain is going to be so much more. Your it'll spread, right? Eventually your whole body is now hurting. So that aspect of things is where sometimes we can tell the difference between, oh, this is just lupus, this is just perimenopause, this is just arthritis, and it's all those things and fibromyalgia. So you can have fibromyalgia on top of other things, and it's this amplifying effect. There are changes in our nervous system, our brains process pain differently. More areas of the brain light up when we experience pain. So there's definitely something more happening in the body. And so as far as the diagnosis, we look at there's certain points on the body that are called tender points. And if those hurt, we look at how many of those points hurt. But we also look at how long have you been experiencing these symptoms? What else is going on? It's a little bit more of like a conversation, an intake, and also feeling your body and checking to make sure it's not just a deficiency of iron or, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is fibromyalgia something that you're born with? Does it get triggered by something? Is there like a common time of life that people experience onset? The only people I know who've had it are adult women. One of my first personal training clients out of college had it, and I've never heard of kids having it, but can they?
It can happen. Yep, it can happen. So we don't totally know the cause of fibromyalgia, the like disease mechanism. We see all these parts and pieces of it. I like to think of it like the parable of the blind man and the elephant, right? Where each blind man is seeing a piece of the elephant. We see pieces of fibromyalgia, but we haven't seen the whole elephant yet. And so my personal opinion of interpreting everything is that there is a genetic component. You are 8 times more likely to have fibromyalgia if you have a first degree relative with fibromyalgia. So there's definitely a genetic piece. Interestingly, not that long ago, 23andMe sent me a little thing saying, hey, find out if you might have fibromyalgia, because they had identified a particular gene and I don't have it. I'm like, well, I have fibromyalgia, but I don't have that. So we still don't know all of the things involved, right? But at the same time, there also seems to be a trauma trigger of some kind for pretty much all of us. So that could be, you got the flu really bad and just like never totally got better, or you were in a car accident and then never totally got better. It could also be like emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, right? So people with a high ACEs score, the Adverse Childhood Experiences score, are more likely to have fibromyalgia. It's not a direct correlation. My ACEs score is 0. So there's lots of, it's like like I said, we know pieces, but we don't know all of it. And so it can make it more difficult. But yes, kids have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I personally have one of my coaches, she has fibromyalgia, and so does her teenage daughter. I've had 2 clients like that where they and their daughters. So again, it's that running in families. And yes, most of it happens for us in, middle age. This is the time when most people are diagnosed, and it just gets more and more common the older you get, which if you think about it, if there is that trauma trigger, the older you are, the more things you've had, right?
The more time to be traumatized. Yeah. That makes sense. So something I'm thinking about is, what women listening can do if they are like, yes, body pain, unrefreshing sleep, fatigue, all these things. I know, I've done a ton of episodes on menopause and just generally like learning your body. One of the best things you can do is start documenting things, keeping some sort of symptom journal where each day you're kind of checking the box of, what body parts hurt and how much energy did I have and things like that. I'd imagine if you're sort of feeling like, yeah, maybe it's menopause, maybe it's fibromyalgia, maybe it's just general life stuff, a great place to start would be in just starting to kind of gather that information and develop some self-awareness, whether for you to put the pieces together or at least then to bring that to your doctor and say, here's what I've been experiencing. Here's kind of, all of the information that I've gathered. Is that a good place to start?
Absolutely. I love that as a starting place. And I think there's a big difference when you go to your doctor and say, I'm in pain, and you can show them a log that shows, oh my goodness, you've been at, a 6 to an 8 for the last 3 weeks. That's very different than just walking in and saying, I'm at an 8 today. Right. And so I think that tracking is really important, not just for us, but also for our providers, like you said. That is a great place to start. And I also, a lot of times the very first piece of homework I give my clients is just paying attention, right? That practical sort of mindfulness where you are just literally, okay, how does this make me feel? If I do this, how do I feel? If I do that, how do I feel? And just starting to make a note. One of the assignments I give my clients is something called the Book of You. And you are literally writing the book about you. And so every time you notice something, just jot it down. Or if you think you might notice something, jot it down. And my favorite one of my clients ever gave me, all in caps, she wrote, never, ever, ever eat Cheetos again, 3 exclamation points. And I love that because I mean, yes, okay, don't eat Cheetos, but you can tell, like, she didn't just do that once, right? She did it and forgot, and did it again and forgot, and maybe even a few more times and forgot, right? Because that's what we do. We experience something, we're like, oh yeah, that's right, I need to not do that. But I think there's something about the act of actually writing it down that just makes it a lot more concrete,
Mm-hmm.
more memorable, and we can start then to shift things. And that also is great information for your providers too, right? You can go in and say, hey, anytime I do this, this is how I feel. If I do this, I feel better. And all of those things are clues, right?
I love that. I think it's a really empowering place to start too, is I'm
Mm-hmm.
not just going to kind of sit back and like wait until the medical system has time for me or kind of comes around to this. I'm going to be proactive in learning what I can about my body and then
Mm-hmm.
using that to advocate for myself. You mentioned that one of the kind of distinctions is these tender points without, I guess, making it so we manifest pain in those areas. What are some of the tender points that that we should be aware of when we're trying to kind of make these distinctions?
Yeah, yeah. So there are several in the neck and the ear traps, right? A few in your back, a few in the lower back, outside of the hips, inside of the knees, inside of your elbow here. I think the biggest one though is up here. If this is like Dr. Ginevra calls these the traps of steel. That is a very good indicator. One of the other little bits of research that I really like is this particular office was looking at all the people that came in with fibromyalgia, and they did x-rays of their necks, and they found that 90% of us, 90% of us had either a straight neck or a reverse curve. So that can be part of feeling better too, is, doing that, getting the correct curve back to your neck. But if you have neck issues, that's a good thing to think about. But really, the biggest indicator for me when I'm talking with people is your pain moves around, right? It's not just in the same place. Like if you have a bad shoulder and your shoulder hurts, and that's all it is, it's probably not fibromyalgia. If you have fibromyalgia, you're going to hurt other places too, right? So it moving around, and then that amplification effect. So when you stub your toe and then everything hurts, or it hurts more than maybe you think it should be, right? So, you miss the door and walk into the door jam. You're like, oh, God, that really hurt. Those are the things for me, more even than the tender points, where I would be like, okay, this is not the way normal pain behaves, and there might be something more going on.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine that this is really hard to treat because number one, it's so hard to diagnose in the first place. Number two, you've got, generally speaking, the idea is to treat the root, not just the symptoms. But it seems like since we don't even necessarily know the root, are we left with trying to address the symptoms?
Yes and no. I mean, I think we do have to, especially at first, I think we do have to address some of the symptoms to give us the capacity to start doing other things.
Mm.
So, for example, when I filed for disability, like I was not in a place to cook my own meals, for example, right? I was not in a place to exercise more. So sometimes we need those medications, those more surface treatments Sometimes they're actually fixing what's going wrong in your body, the way we're processing pain, the neurotransmitter imbalances, the hormonal things, right? Like all of that can be addressed. And once we start to feel a little bit better, then we can start to work more on diet and exercise and, all of that kind of stuff. But I think we really do need both. And I'm always telling my clients, sometimes you need to take medication so you can eventually not take medication, because we also have to get out of that pain cycle. We have to break that pain cycle, because for people with fibromyalgia, your body basically sees everything as pain. Right? It's like you're the hammer and everything looks like a nail. And so we need to actually teach your body how to not be in pain. And so that may mean taking some medications, taking some pain meds, even to break that cycle, let your body calm down, right? Your nervous system calm down, all of that. And then eventually we can come off of those things. I mean, when I first started, I mean, at one point I was on, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, something like that, medications, and all for my fibromyalgia. And now I really don't really take anything. I mean, I'm always going to be taking my thyroid meds, right? And I'm going to be taking my depression meds and, those kinds of things. But like in terms of managing fibro pain, I don't take anything for that because I haven't had any pain. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I hope that gives hope to anyone out there listening who may be suffering right now. And it totally makes sense. It's really hard to think about doing or changing much of anything when you're in pain and exhausted all the time.
Yeah.
So, right, even if you're starting with kind of the more surface level, it's like, right, start there so that then eventually we can get deeper and hopefully then sort of come around full circle.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned, exercise, nutrition. What are some of kind of the lifestyle interventions that can help control pain and with the rest of the fibro symptoms?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing is actually pacing. And nobody ever wants to hear that.
A very unpopular answer. Yeah.
Let me put that another way for you that might be a little easier to take. I like to think of budgeting our energy like we budget money. And every day you get a certain amount, no matter who you are, fibro or not, every single person has a certain amount. Some people might have a big budget, other people might have a little budget, but we all have a budget, right? And the trick to making life worthwhile when you have something like fibromyalgia or really any other chronic condition like this is to think about how you want to actually spend that budget and make sure that you're spending it on the things that are important to you. Because all too often we will spend all our energy on all the shoulds, right? That nobody really cares about but us, or the obligations, the things we said yes to that we probably should have said no to. And then at the end of the day, we've got nothing left for the things that really matter for us, for our families, for our children. And so I think that is really one of the biggest shifts that people can make, is to be more conscious about how they're spending their energy and really be more aware of what each thing costs so that you can make better choices. So one of the things that I do is I teach my clients how to use a step tracker. It's not a perfect way to measure energy, because obviously us sitting here doing this takes energy and I have no steps, right? But in general, it's a good way to sort of estimate and just start thinking about how many steps do you feel good at, and then what do things cost? And just to put things into perspective, we're not using the pedometer to try to walk more. This is our top limit number. So when I was really, really sick, when I was filing for disability, my top number was like 2,500 steps, not even 3,000 steps. And knowing that, though, when Scott, my husband, says, "Hey, do you want to go to Costco?" And I know a trip around Costco is easily 500 to 1,000 steps, I can look at where I'm at and say, "Oh, I don't have the budget for that." Not today. Or if I know I'm going to be doing something, then I can maybe make sure that I save those steps right? And not spend them. And just, again, thinking about budgeting energy like you would budget money, I think is a big help for a lot of people, because pacing just seems like um, you're telling me not to do the things I want to do, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. We talk a ton about steps here as one of, the best ways to lead an overall active lifestyle. And it's a really interesting perspective to acknowledge that, yeah, that is often the goal. But if you were someone who is struggling to get through the day and to have
You
enough
don't want
energy or
more.
to move pain free, then it's not about doing more. It's about knowing where your personal limits are and saying, I need to really prioritize where this energy budget is going to go, because it needs to go to the most important things. It's not limitless. So let me
Right.
make sure that what I have energy for is the things that are really deserving of it. I'm curious, you mentioned that you're not on any medications now for fiber related things. Does that mean that you are able to, or you have been able now to increase activity, or are you still working with a much more limited budget?
Yeah, so good question. So I was really shocked the day my doctor said, "Oh, by the way, I consider your fibromyalgia to be in remission for a few years
Wow.
now." I was like, so yeah, I mean, I haven't experienced any fibro pain since 2018, I think. So it's been quite a long time. And yes, in that time, I have definitely been able to increase my activity. Since that time, written some books, all the things, right? Like my brain works better. I have the energy to do things. I'm not in pain. So yes, it can come back. And I think a good way to look at this is similar to if you were to break your leg, right? For a certain period of time, we need to stay off that leg so that it can heal properly. And if we don't stay off the leg, we're going to have more issues. And it's not going to be weeks with fibromyalgia, it might be years, but it's the same kind of thing. We may need to cut back for a while. We may need to say no more often. We may need to live at, 2,500, 3,000 steps. But the reason we're doing that is to give our bodies the space to be able to heal. That's what our bodies are made to do, right? And so if we give them everything, our bodies everything they need, we will in many cases get better. Obviously I can't guarantee that, but yeah. And then once you do start to feel better, you can start to add in more activity, whatever that might look like for you. I have a friend who is an Olympic style weightlifter who has fibromyalgia. I have friends who are runners with fibromyalgia. Did they have to give that up for a while? Absolutely. Yes, they did. But like, my friend Julie, who just, ran a training, I think right now for a half marathon. It took time for her to get there. Right. And I think what we have to do is sort of adjust in our minds what that time frame is supposed to look like, because it isn't going to be weeks. It probably isn't even going to be months. We're probably talking years, but it can happen. It absolutely can happen. And I see it over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's one of those kind of double-edged swords where hopefully there's some comfort in knowing this isn't necessarily going to be a lifelong, you're not going to feel this way for forever. But the flip side of that is years feels like a long time.
Yeah, I know,
But
right?
but hopefully you can kind of balance those two things. And I feel like we kind of face that with any sort of injury or limitation where it's really hard to change the way you've been doing things. It's really hard not to be able to do, or to not be able to do the things that you enjoy or that you identify and help make you you. And even if it's, an acute injury where, yeah, like you said, you broke an ankle, you got to stay off it for a little bit. That's tough to do, but it's so important to keep kind of the end goal in mind, which
Mhm.
is your goal to do, to walk 5,000 steps today? Is it to do this particular half marathon, or is it to generally be healthy and active and pain free in the long run? In which case, this is the price to pay to achieve that for yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the things that I really try to drive home with my clients and students is making that shift, that exactly what you're talking about. Most of the time when we have a condition like this, our focus is on the condition, right? I have
Mhm.
fibromyalgia. I can't do that because of my fibromyalgia. I had to give this up because of my fibromyalgia. I have to take this medication because of my fibromyalgia. And if we can shift that to focusing on getting better, right? It might look exactly the same. I'm still taking the same medication, but I'm taking it so that I can get
Mm.
better.
Mm.
Or I say no to something so that I can get better. I'm not going to the party tonight, not because my fibro won't let me, but because I want to feel better tomorrow. Right.
So good. That's such an important reframe that could make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So aside from pacing, what are some of the other things that for you personally and for the clients that you work with that, essentially like make remission possible?
Sleep is a biggie. And I mean, sleep for anybody everywhere, right? Sleep is crucial. If we don't get good sleep, we're not going to be well, whatever's going on. And that is definitely true with fibromyalgia as well. Sometimes when I say that to people with fibromyalgia, that feels like an impossible task because our sleep is poor. But there are things that can be done. And it's really a matter of working with somebody who really knows. Like your average, even sleep doctor out there isn't necessarily going to know because there are fibro specific issues. One other statistic I'll throw out, because this is such an important one, 45% of fibromyalgia patients have sleep apnea. The average
Wow.
population, it's in single digits, right? So
Fascinating.
huge, huge difference. So if you do have fibromyalgia or you think you have fibromyalgia, you want to get a sleep study done. You want to rule that out because sleep apnea is very treatable, right? When I had my sleep study, I discovered I was waking up 45 times an hour. That is once every 80 seconds. Of course, I was exhausted.
Right.
So getting a CPAP machine changed so much for me. So sleep is really critical. And like I said, anybody who's listening can kind of start with that sleep study and just determining, do you have sleep apnea or not, and then doing whatever treatments for that. But there are other fibro specific things that you may need to talk to somebody who actually understands. So sleep is critical. We already talked about breaking the pain cycle. That is also really critical. We've got to look at all the underlying things. One of my thoughts as I was working on myself was if all the pieces work well, the whole will work better. Right. So let's make sure my thyroid is doing what it's supposed to do. My adrenals, my hormones are balanced. The neurotransmitters are, if all the pieces work right, the whole feels better. And so looking at all of those, do you have any nutritional deficiencies? Do you have hormonal imbalances that need to be fixed, and addressing those kinds of things. Energy, of course, we can address both energy and brain fog, but I think if we can work on sleep, breaking the pain cycle, and then fixing all those other things, that gets us most of the way there. And of course, there's lots of other little things we can work on too, but yeah.
I often give that advice about sleep, even for,
Oh,
people
yeah.
without fibro, is just like, it's just one of those kind of linchpins that you feel like you got this whole host of fires to put out. But the reality is, if you just put out the main one, it's going to trickle down and take care of most of the rest of them. And then whatever is still unresolved, you got a lot more energy and oomph to put towards them.
Exactly.
One more thing I wanted to talk about is the kind of the stigma related to, to go back to the title of your documentary, invisible illnesses, especially, I think, pain related ones and fatigue related ones, where it's just like very easy to dismiss, even well intentioned people. It's very easy to dismiss of like, yeah, oh yeah, I'm tired too. Oh, my back hurts too. Like we're all,
Yes.
So I would imagine that, especially for someone either struggling without being diagnosed or maybe newly diagnosed and kind of trying to figure this out, it's probably very hard to explain to people without almost getting dismissed as like just being like a crybaby.
Hmm. Yeah, it is hard. I mentioned at the beginning, I was diagnosed, I'd been married 6 months when I was diagnosed. And I know my husband struggled with that. And a lot of it was because one day I would seem like I was totally fine. And then the next day I'm sitting there in my chair. Oh, can you get me a drink of water? I can't even get up. And he's like, but you could do that yesterday. Right. And so, and the invisible part of things, right? You can't see anything. Right. And so it really is difficult. And to be honest, I have some sympathy for the people around us because it's got to be hard from their perspective to understand if we're not talking with them about all the other stuff, right?
Mm.
Just because I'm here, my makeup's on, my hair is done, I look fine, doesn't necessarily mean that I feel 100%. So there can be some fun little tricks that you can do to maybe help communicate that. So just a couple things my clients have done. My favorite one, I had a client who put a decorative bowl on her kitchen counter and then some decorative rocks in it. And the level of rocks in the bowl was how good she felt. And so if the bowl was full, her husband could just look at that and he would know, okay, this is a good day. Today would be a day to say, hey, do you want to go out to dinner or whatever, right? She said it gave her such satisfaction to pour those rocks out all over the counter when she was having a bad day. And he could just walk into the kitchen. Oh, today is one of those days. So there can be like visual cues because that's part of it too. Like they get tired of asking, we get tired of answering, like, how is today? Right. Another client had like a thermometer gauge on her fridge, right, for how she felt for the day. And those things can be really helpful. But I think the biggest thing really is communication. And sometimes you might need tools to help you with that. One of the things I'm most proud of with that documentary is it is a great tool for that. So it's available on Amazon. I think it's also available for free on Tubi. But if you go to the my website or the documentary website, it lists where you can find it. But like, watch that with the people in your life because sometimes it's different hearing from other people. This is what fibromyalgia is like than you saying it. So that can be a great tool. A friend of mine wrote a book called Raven's Doll, How to Explain Fibromyalgia to Your Child. And it's written for children that explains fibromyalgia. So I think we do have to go out of our way a little bit to explain that because people just aren't going to. They can't see it in us. They have no frame of reference for it. Like I used in our conversation, right? The comparing the pain that we feel with the pain that we might experience with, having the flu or something, or when you're sick like that and it just feels too hard to even lift your arms, right? That level of fatigue, and then just never getting better, right? This isn't just a couple of weeks and then you're good, right? I think it is getting a little bit better thanks to COVID, actually, because long COVID has so many similarities to fibromyalgia. I mean, they aren't the same thing. There's different things happening in the body, but the symptoms are very much the same. And with more and more people being diagnosed with long COVID, experiencing that, I think it does give people a little bit more of a frame of reference.
I really appreciate that answer. And I think too, it's so easy, no matter what the kind of the difference is, it's so easy to just kind of project onto other people that like it's their fault, they don't understand me, kind of this victim mentality. And I really appreciate the spin you kind of put on it that people don't, like, they're not ill-intentioned, they just don't have a frame of reference. And unfortunately, part of your job in this relationship is to better communicate and explain in ways that the people who love you can understand, to remember that it's not me versus them. They're not intentionally trying to draw this wedge between us and make me other. They don't understand. So how can I, because I can't change them, how can I try to explain this differently or more thoroughly, or like you said, from an outside perspective, to help us come to the same side and remember that we're on the same team. I think that's really important to remember. Tami, you're obviously a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate the work that you've been doing. the founding the Coaching Institute and the podcast and this documentary, it sounds like you really have devoted your life to helping create the tools and the resources that you needed and that
Exactly.
other people need. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what the Coaching Institute does, what you cover on the podcast, a little bit more about, your work and all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. So the podcast is all things fibromyalgia. So there are episodes where it's just me talking to you. Just I did one not all that long ago titled "The Down and Dirty on Getting Clean," and actually talk about the struggles that it is just literally keeping our bodies clean. So it's practical stuff like that. But I also have, interviews with doctors and other experts, other conditions that might come alongside fibromyalgia, other resources. So that if anybody is listening, if you've got fibromyalgia, find the Fibromyalgia podcast. We're anywhere you listen to podcasts. Obviously, you're listening to this one, so you're a podcast person, right? You can also find us at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Also, the Institute. So I started off just as a regular one-on-one coach working with people with fibromyalgia. And there are millions of people with fibromyalgia. And one day it just really hit me. I'm like a drop of water in the ocean. There's just so many more people who need help, which is when I wrote my books and started training other people really to do the work that I was doing. So the Institute is that place where I train other coaches. And it's also a place where you can find a coach if you're looking for one. The other thing that a lot of times will happen with the Institute is our certified fibromyalgia advisor training program. It's the fibro education that your doctors really should have. And if you as a patient just want to take that piece, if you have no intention of becoming a coach, we see our students who graduate from that training program improving by about 50% in just 90 days. So it is one of the best ways I know to improve your fibromyalgia. So it's really great for that. And then, of course, if people want to go on and become a coach, we have that option as well. So the Fibromyalgia Podcast website, if you are interested in learning more about finding a coach, becoming a coach, those are in the resources on the podcast website. You can even download free copies of my book out there.
Amazing. You're doing amazing work, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for tuning in, you guys listening. Tami, thank you for being here, and I will be back next week with another episode.
And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.